All of these tomatoes that I'm holding have one thing in common. They weigh over 2 pounds. So in this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about growing 2-pound tomatoes. So many of us gardeners set our sights at breaking a 2-pound tomato. It's something that as gardeners we strive for because it's so much larger than life. You know, when you look at a 1-pound tomato compared to a 2-pound tomato, it makes it look miniature in size, even though a 1-pound tomato is still huge. A 2-pound tomato is something that does not occur very often, but as gardeners, we can greaten our chances of breaking that 2-pound threshold by following some of these steps. So in this video, I'm going to break down those steps. I'm going to show you just how to do it because we've actually done it 6 times this year. It's the most amount of tomatoes we've had over 2 pounds ever in our garden. And so we always try to grow bigger tomatoes. Bigger is always better for us. I love tomatoes that don't even fit on a slice of bread, and these tomatoes are no exception. So we're going to talk about it, and we're going to break down the things that we can do to better our chances because it is very difficult. I'm going to first let you guys know that breaking a 2-pound tomato is very difficult. The largest tomato we grew was actually a Dr. White Cheese tomato, and it weighed in at 2 pounds 6 ounces. This thing was absolutely monolithic, and it was so large that when you sliced it flat, it actually hung over 3 inches on each side of a regular slice of bread. It was so giant that you could slice the tomato in half, and it would still fit perfectly within a slice of bread. So it was absolutely gigantic. But these tomatoes are also just beastly. And the thing you'll notice is they're not misformed. These tomatoes are not all gnarly. They're not all cat-faced. And that's because it's how we grow them. It's all in the methodologies that we use to grow giant tomatoes that doesn't rely on a freak chance. Because yes, a freak chance can occur where it's called a super bloom. And a super bloom will happen where there's giant mutation where 3 or 4 flowers will cluster together and it will form 4 tomatoes all fused together. You know, that can be great and it can be a massive tomato, and some of the largest tomatoes in the world come from super blooms. But I like to actually have a tomato that's over 2 pounds that you can say, that is one solid slice, one tomato, one singular bloom produced this one tomato. It's truly an achievement that is, it's remarkable when it actually happens. So the first step in growing a 2+ pound tomato is all in variety selection. You're not gonna get a 2-pound cherry tomato. It just won't ever happen. And so rather than trying to grow a 2-pound cherry tomato, grow a variety that is known to grow giant tomatoes. That's the first thing. It's the most common sense way to grow big tomatoes is by having genetics that are naturally going to grow bigger than others. This is a Typhon Mennonite. It was brought over by German immigrants, actually Mennonite immigrants from Germany, and it's actually 2 pounds 1 ounce. Another variety that produces huge tomatoes is called Gold Medal. Gold Medal is a yellow bicolored tomato that regularly produces tomatoes over 1.5 pounds without a problem at all. Any type of beefsteak strain actually has a larger fruit size and will generally be over 1 pound to 1.5 pounds, and sometimes even over 2 pounds. So brandy wines are another great example. This is, like I said, the Typhon Mennonite. We also grew something called Delicious. Now Delicious sets the world record for largest tomato. It was grown, I think, around 5 or 6 pounds. It's just an absolutely massive tomato of epic proportions, and that was Delicious. So Delicious is a beefsteak strain tomato that produces regularly large tomatoes. In fact, we grew 3 tomatoes off this plant that each one of them was almost 2 pounds each. They were 1 pound 12 ounces, all 3 tomatoes. So just absolutely massive tomatoes of epic proportions. So growing those varieties that produce large tomatoes are going to give you a better chance. So again, stick to those beefsteaks and do your research about finding ones that do produce large tomatoes, that do regularly produce tomatoes over 1 pound. Because if you're growing something that produces tomatoes that are 8 ounces to 1 pound, that threshold is just, that 2 pound threshold is so far away. If it's just, you know, if the biggest tomato you're gonna produce usually tops out at right around 1 pound to 1.25 pounds, there's just not enough that you can do unless you get super lucky to hit that 2 pound threshold. So pick a tomato like this that's regularly gonna hit 1 pound to 2 pounds without a problem. The next thing that you can do to grow giant 2+ pound tomatoes is in your pruning method. If you grow single stem, This is the method that's going to give you the largest tomatoes, and that's because all of the side growth, all of the suckers that occur on tomato plants tend to make it very bushy. And those branches will eventually fruit, but they constrict airflow. They lead to a more diseased plant, but also they steal energy away from the main tomato plant. And so each one of these suckers produces a new plant. And if we have one giant tomato on there, but that energy is being divided up between 3 or 4 smaller, mini plants growing off of this main mother plant, that energy is being sapped and it can't produce nearly as large of tomatoes. So by single stemming your plants, you're going to have more energy going into one tomato or a cluster of tomatoes on this main mother plant that are going to guarantee larger tomatoes. Now, obviously, this will mean that some of your yield will be decreased, but you're going to have larger tomatoes and you're going to have more of a healthy plant. So in my opinion, I actually always prefer to single stem my plants because I end up getting more tomatoes and more tomatoes by weight than I would without, with just letting them go crazy. So single stemming and pruning is another amazing way to guarantee larger tomatoes. The third thing you can do to growing a 2+ pound tomato is watering frequently. You have to remember that a tomato is 90% water. And so if a tomato is 90% water and you're not watering as frequently as possible, let's say you're having a drought, but you don't want to go out and water, your tomato plants are going to produce smaller tomatoes because the tomato inside is water. Those membranes are filled with water. And it's just like a water balloon. You can have a water balloon that's this big, but its potential could be this big if you just filled it with more water. And so what you need to do is you need to water regularly, making sure the plant has enough moisture. And so we grow with cores. We have our core gardening in place, so we don't have to water as frequently. But even this summer, it's been so dry, we've had to water 3 times this summer. So no shame in watering. We use our water from our rain barrels, so they don't have chlorine and chloramine from city water. But if you do have city water, just put your water in buckets, let it sit out for 24 hours, or get a chlorine filter that attaches to your hose spigot and water your plants, because it's the only way you're going to get large tomatoes above 2 pounds is by watering regularly. Now, watering too much can lead to cracking, so just know how much is too much. If you stick your finger down to your second knuckle on your finger, it means that you have plenty of moisture if you can feel dampness down there. The roots are down deep, and so that's going to be sucking up that water that's deep down in the soil. So you don't have to be watering on a daily basis, but you do have to ensure that they're not stressed for water. And so if you're not seeing any rain for a week or 2 weeks, check and maybe even get a soil moisture meter to check. If you don't feel confident with your finger, get a soil moisture meter. If it says it's dry or slightly dry, give it some water, because your plants are going to uptake that moisture and help to produce bigger fruits. The next thing I want to talk about is fertilizing. I just picked this beautiful Marion tomato. It's just a giant pound-plus tomato. Definitely not a 2-pound contender, but it's still really big. But I want to talk about fertilizing. Fertilizing is so important because it makes sure the plant stays stress-free. We give our plants a balanced fertilizer of trifecta twice a year. Our plants that produce big tomatoes, they use a lot of nutrients, and it takes a lot of energy to produce big fruits. So what you don't want to do is just put a giant bunch of fertilizer out in the beginning of spring and say, there you go, there's the rest of the fertilizer for the rest of the year. Because these plants here, most of your plants are going to be fine with it, but to produce a giant 2-pound tomato, it takes so much more nutrients and so much more energy. So we'll go back, once the plants have already produced one set of fruit, we'll go back and we'll fertilize, we'll top dress around the plant a second time so they have plenty of nutrients to keep producing. This is something that's very important if you're going to want to produce giant tomatoes and a lot of them, and hopefully a 2-pound tomato, because it's just something you cannot skimp on. Nutrients are so important to plant health, plant growth, and you have to remember that the more foliage you have, the more energy they can produce from the sun, meaning the bigger the tomatoes are going to get. And the final thing that I wanted to talk about is waiting. Waiting is something that as gardeners we hate to do. As soon as our tomatoes start to blush, we say, I gotta get them in the house, I gotta cut them up, I wanna turn them into a BLT right away. But the longer you can leave them on the plant, the better. Most of my tomatoes that are over 2 pounds put on that last little bit of weight to push them over that 2-pound threshold just as soon as they're about ready to fall off the plant. When your tomatoes are super ripe, they're going to be putting in water that whole time, and they're also going to be putting in sugar. Sugar weighs more than water. And so the sweeter the tomato is, the heavier it's going to be, the denser it's going to be. And so by letting your tomatoes ripen on the vine, they're actually going to be getting heavier. And this is why I let my tomatoes pretty much stay on the vine literally until they're ready to fall off, because the longer they're on there, the more sugars they're going to produce, and the more water that's going to be going into the tomato as possible. The tomato itself is like a one-way valve. Water and nutrients can enter the tomato through the stem, but can't leave. And that means that the longer you can leave it on the vine, the larger and naturally heavier it's going to be. So these are all the things that you can do to growing a 2+ pound tomato. That and a little luck. And like I said, it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, it's very satisfying. But you have to follow these steps and follow them very strictly so that you can have the best chance at success. There's really nothing else that you need to grow a 2+ pound tomato other than everything that I've outlined in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, I hope you learned something new, and I really do hope that you grow a 2+ pound tomato because it is so incredible, it's so much fun, and it's really something that not a lot of gardeners can do. So I hope you guys try it and let me know if you've gotten a 2+ pound tomato in the comments box below, and I'll catch you all on tomorrow's episode. Grow big or go home, everyone. See ya.